My name is Emily, and until the day my family kicked me out of our restaurant deal, I believed blood meant loyalty. I was wrong. I still remember that morning like it happened a few hours ago. The smell of fresh coffee from the restaurant kitchen, the sound of plates clinking, and my father's voice echoing through the dining hall like everything belonged to him. Because it did. At least that's what he believed. We were standing inside our family restaurant, a place my mother always called our legacy. But for me, it had always felt like a battlefield disguised as a business. I had worked there since I was 16. While other girls my age were going to parties, I was learning inventory sheets, supplier negotiations, and how to smile at customers even when my feet were bleeding from 10-hour shifts. But I never complained. 'Cause I had a dream. I wanted to modernize the restaurant. Turn it into something bigger, something that could expand across the city, maybe even the country. I spent years studying business online, saving every dollar I earned, and building a complete expansion plan. And finally, the day came when I believed everything would change. That morning, I walked into the office holding a thick folder. My hands were shaking, not from fear but excitement. Inside that folder was my entire proposal. Branding redesign, franchise model, profit projections, even investor connections I had personally reached out to. I remember smiling when I saw my father sitting at the table. My mother was beside him. My older brother Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed like he was already bored of whatever I was about to say. In the morning I said softly, "I think it's time we take the restaurant to the next level." My father didn't even look up. "This is another one of your ideas, Emily, I'm busy." But I didn't stop. I placed the folder on the table. "I've built a full expansion plan. If we implement this, we can triple revenue in 2 years. I've already spoken to potential partners." That's when he finally looked at me. Not with pride. Not with curiosity. With irritation. My mother sighed like she already knew where this was going. "And Daniela," he smirked. He said. "You spoke to investors." He nodded. "They're interested. We just need to," but my father raised his hand. That single gesture silenced the entire room. "Emily," he said coldly, "this restaurant has survived for 23 years without your ideas." Something inside me cracked, but I held my ground. "Survived? Not grown," I replied quietly. That's when everything changed. The room went silent. Even the kitchen noise felt far away. My father stood up slowly, pushing his chair back with a sharp scrape against the floor. "You think you can come in here and rewrite everything I built?" he said. "I'm trying to help," I answered. But Daniel laughed under his breath. "She thinks she's a businesswoman now." My mother finally spoke, but not in my defense. "Emily, maybe you should focus on your job instead of dreaming too big." That hurt more than anything else. Because I wasn't a stranger. I wasn't an outsider. I was their daughter. Still, I tried one last time. "I'm not asking for control," I said. "Just a chance to prove it works. If it fails, I'll step back." That's when my father's expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. "No," he said. "One word. Final." Then he pointed toward the door. And said something I never thought I would hear in my life. "Leave the restaurant. You're no longer part of this deal." For a moment I didn't move. I thought maybe I misheard him. Maybe I misunderstood. But Daniel stepped forward and took the folder from the table. And dropped it into the trash bin right in front of me. Page by page. My work disappeared. Months of sleepless nights. Years of sacrifice. My throat went dry. "You're serious?" I whispered. My father didn't even hesitate. "We are." And just like that, I was no longer part of my own family's restaurant. As I walked toward the exit, I heard my mother say something softly behind me. Something I wish I never heard. "She'll come back when she realizes she has nothing." The door closed behind me. But what they didn't know was that I already had something. Something they had just made very dangerous. And what happened next started everything falling apart. I stood outside the restaurant for almost 10 minutes without moving. Cars passed behind me. People laughed. Life continued like nothing had happened. But my world had just collapsed. I kept replaying it in my head. My father's voice, Daniel's smirk, my mother's cold silence. It didn't feel real. It felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I had built everything for them, and they erased me in less than 5 minutes. I finally started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay near that building anymore. Every step felt heavier, like my body was refusing to accept what had just happened. By the time I reached a small bus stop a few streets away, my hands were shaking. That's when I sat down. And finally broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just silently. Because sometimes the deepest pain doesn't make noise. It just sits inside your chest and refuses to leave. Pulled out my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. That hurt more than anything. I expected at least one text. Maybe my mother. Maybe even Daniel, if not to apologize then at least to mock me again. But there was nothing. It was like I had been deleted. I leaned back and stared at the sky. And then something strange happened. My mind stopped crying and started thinking. For years I had done everything for that restaurant. I knew its numbers, suppliers, customer behavior, peak hours, waste patterns, everything. And one truth suddenly became clear. They didn't just reject my idea. They rejected the person who could actually save them. I slowly opened my folder on my phone, the digital backup I always kept. Even though they threw my printed proposal away. They didn't know I had everything saved. Every spreadsheet, every strategy, every contact. And that's when a dangerous thought entered my mind. What if I didn't go back? What if I built something of my own? At first it felt impossible. Had no money, no team, no support. But I had something they ignored for years. Experience. Real hands-on knowledge of how their business actually worked. And I knew their weaknesses better than anyone. A cold wind passed through the street as I stood up. For the first time since leaving the restaurant. I wasn't just hurt. I was awake. That night I didn't go home. I rented the cheapest room I could find above a small convenience store. The stairs creaked with every step, and the walls smelled like old paint and oil. But it didn't matter. It was mine. At least for now. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a moment I hesitated. Because once you start something like this, there's no going back. Then I typed a single line. Independent restaurant concept plan. Phase 1. And I began rebuilding my life from zero. Hours passed. Then more hours. Outside, the city slowly went quiet. But inside my room, something new was being born. Around 2 a.m. I took a break and checked my phone again. That's when I saw it. A news alert popped up from a local business page. My family's restaurant. I clicked it without thinking. The headline made my stomach drop. Popular family restaurant facing sudden supply delays and customer complaints. I stared at the screen. That couldn't be a coincidence. I opened the article. One line stood out. Several suppliers have reportedly paused deliveries due to contract confusion. My heart slowed. Because I recognized those supplier systems. I had helped build them. And I knew exactly where the weak points were. My hands tightened around the phone. Not because I was happy. Not because I was sad. But because I realized something terrifying. They didn't just throw me out. They threw out the only person who was quietly holding everything together. And now, they were going to find out what happens when that person disappears. Closed the laptop slowly. And whispered to myself. This is just the beginning. By the next morning I didn't sleep at all. I just sat there on that cheap bed, watching the sunlight slowly creep through the thin curtain. My laptop was still open. My mind was still running. And my phone kept buzzing. First I ignored it. But then I saw something that made me sit up straight. 15 missed calls. All from my mother. I stared at the screen without blinking. A few days ago I would have answered immediately. I would have panicked. I would have gone running back just to fix whatever problem they had created. But not anymore. Not after the way they looked at me like I was nothing. Not after they erased me like I never mattered. I let the phone go silent again. Then another notification popped up. Message. This time from Daniel. If you did something to the suppliers, fix it. This isn't funny. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because for the first time they were looking at me as something more than just a useless daughter. They were looking at me as a threat. I leaned back slowly. So they had already started feeling it. But I opened my laptop again and checked the small tracking notes I used to keep during my time at the restaurant. Supplier names, payment cycles, delivery schedules, backup vendors. Everything was there. Everything they never bothered to understand. Because to them I was just the girl who works in the restaurant. But to me, I was the system behind the system. Few hours later I stepped outside for the first time that day. The city looked the same. But I didn't. I went to a small cafe nearby and ordered a coffee I couldn't really afford. I needed to think clearly. As I sat there, I overheard two businessmen talking at the next table. Yeah, that restaurant is losing customers fast. I heard their delivery issues are getting worse. My fingers tightened around the cup. So it wasn't just internal anymore. The cracks were public. That meant one thing. Panic was spreading. And panic always creates mistakes. Back in my room I made a decision. If I was going to do this, I couldn't just survive. I had to build something they couldn't ignore. Something better. I opened a blank document and wrote the first line. Project EM. I stopped. Name. Emily. I stared at it for a moment. Then continued. Project Empire. It felt bold. Too bold for someone who had nothing just 24 hours ago. But something inside me refused to feel small anymore. I spent the entire day planning. New menu concepts. Fast service model. Digital ordering system. Lower waste strategy. Social media branding. Everything my family's restaurant refused to evolve into. By evening my eyes were burning. But I wasn't done. Because at 9:12 p.m., something happened that changed everything again. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. But something told me to answer. Hello. Said cautiously. A shaky voice came through. It was my mother. But she didn't sound like the woman who told me I had nothing. She sounded afraid. Emily, she said quietly. We need to talk. I stayed silent. She continued. Your father, he's furious. The suppliers are demanding payments early. Customers are leaving bad reviews. We don't understand what happened. Then the words that made my chest tighten. Did you really leave us like this, on purpose? I looked out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance. And for the first time, I realized something important. They didn't just miss me. They depended on me. But instead of answering her question immediately, I simply said, You didn't lose me, Mom. A long silence. Then I added, You removed me. And I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From control. Because now I knew the truth. This wasn't just a family conflict anymore. This was a collapse. And I was standing exactly where I needed to be to watch it happen. The morning after I ended that call, I didn't feel peace. Felt something heavier. Expectation. Because once people realize they need you, they don't just disappear again. They come back harder. And I was right. At 10:03 a.m. my phone rang again. This time it wasn't my family. It was an unknown number, but this one felt different. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Hello. A calm male voice came through. Is this Emily? Yes, who is this? There was a short pause, like he was choosing his words carefully. My name is Victor Hale. I manage investments for food and hospitality ventures. My grip tightened slightly. I've heard about your family's restaurant situation. That sentence alone made my stomach drop. Because if investors were already hearing about it, then the situation wasn't just internal anymore. It was spreading. He continued. And I've also heard something more interesting. I didn't speak. I heard you were the one running most of their operational structure behind the scenes. My heart stopped for half a second. Who told him that? There was no way he should know that. Unless someone inside had already started talking. I don't know what you've heard, I said carefully. He chuckled lightly. Think you do. Silence. Then he said the words that changed everything. I want to meet you. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Why? Because your family is losing control, he said. And I don't think they understand why. But I do. I looked out the window. The same broken building. The same noisy street. The same life I had been trying to escape. And now, someone was offering me a door out. But I wasn't naive. I'm not interested in being used against them, I said firmly. Victor didn't hesitate. That's not what this is. Another pause. Then he added, I'm offering you independence. That word hit differently. Independence. Not revenge. Not control. Something else. Something I had never actually been given. I'll give you resources, he continued. Funding, connections, a location if your plan is real. My breath slowed. But I want one thing in return. Course. Nothing comes free. What? Yes. Proof, he said simply. That you're not just angry, but capable. I closed my eyes for a moment. Angry. But capable. That was the question I had been asking myself since the day I was thrown out. I'll think about it, I said finally. Victor responded calmly. I'll send you a meeting location. You decide. And then the call ended. I sat there in silence for a long time. Because now everything had shifted again. Before I was rebuilding from nothing. Had an offer. But accepting it meant stepping fully into a world I had only studied from the outside. A world of money, power, and consequences. That evening I couldn't focus. My mind kept going back to one thing. Victor's words. Your family is losing control. So I did something I hadn't done in a while. I checked the restaurant's public reviews. And what I saw made my chest tighten. Service has dropped dramatically. Food quality inconsistent. Waiting times unacceptable. Feels like management is lost. It wasn't just complaints anymore. It was a pattern. Collapse forming in real time. And buried in those reviews was something even more important. A few people mentioned staff confusion. Incorrect orders. Missing system updates. That was my work. My systems. My structure. And now without me. It was breaking. I leaned back slowly. For the first time I didn't feel like I was chasing revenge. I felt like I was watching reality confirm itself. That night I made a decision. If I met Victor, I wouldn't go as a victim. And I wouldn't go as a daughter. I would go as someone they should have never underestimated. Before sleeping, I opened my laptop and typed one line. Phase 2. Build without permission. Then I added another. And never look back. Outside, the city lights flickered again. But inside me, something had already shifted permanently. I almost didn't go. That was the truth. At 7:41 a.m., I was still sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the message Victor had sent the night before. Location, the Glass Line Hotel, 14th floor. 11 a.m. Felt too clean. Too perfect. The kind of meeting where people smile while planning something you don't fully understand yet. But then I thought about my family. About how easily they erased me. About how quickly they started collapsing without even realizing why. And I stood up. Not because I trusted Victor. But because I trusted one thing more than fear. Opportunity. The Glass Line Hotel looked like a different world. Polished floors. Quiet elevators. People who looked like they never worried about money. I walked in wearing the only formal outfit I owned. A simple black blazer I used to wear during restaurant meetings. Suddenly felt small. At the reception, they guided me to the elevator without questions. 14th floor. Every second going up felt like I was leaving my old life behind permanently. When the doors opened, I saw him. Victor Hale. He wasn't what I expected. No loud presence. No dramatic aura. Just calm. Controlled. Like someone who had already won conversations before they started. He stood near a glass wall overlooking the city. Emily, he said without turning around. Came. I stepped forward slowly. I said I would think about it, I replied. He finally turned. And studied me for a moment. Not like a businessman. Like someone measuring risk. You're younger than I expected, he said. I'm also not here for compliments, I answered. That made him smile slightly. He gestured toward a table. I didn't move immediately. I want clarity first, I said. What exactly are you offering me? Victor nodded like he expected that question. Then he placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents, financial projections, market analysis, and something that made my breath tighten, a breakdown of my family's restaurant. Detailed. Too detailed. How did you get this? Asked sharply. He leaned back. I invest in failing businesses before they collapse. I study them. My eyes narrowed. And my family. He didn't hesitate. They're already in free fall. Silence. Then he added something softer. But not because they're weak. He looked at me directly. Because they removed the person keeping everything stable. That hit harder than I expected. I looked away for a second. Not emotional. Just aware. So what do you want from me? Asked again. Victor folded his hands. I want you to build something better. And I want to fund it. My heartbeat slowed. But suspicion stayed. Why me? That question lingered in the air for a moment. Then he said, because most people don't rebuild systems they were rejected from. They destroy them. He leaned forward slightly. But you studied it. You improved it in silence. And when they ignored you, you didn't break them immediately. My fingers tightened under the table. You're watching me too closely, I said. That's my job, he replied calmly. Another silence. Then he pushed the folder closer. This is your chance, he said. A new restaurant. Your structure. Your rules. Full control. I stared at it. Everything I had ever wanted. But wrapped inside someone else's power. And what do you gain? I asked quietly. Victor didn't smile this time. I gained the fastest growing concept in the city. Honesty. At least that. I exhaled slowly. I need time. He nodded. You already made your decision. You just don't want to admit it yet. That line stayed in my head longer than anything else. When I stood up to leave, Victor didn't stop me. But he said one last thing. Emily. Your family will try to pull you back soon. Paused at the door. And when they do, don't confuse guilt with loyalty. That was the moment I realized something. This wasn't just about building a restaurant anymore. It was a war between the past I came from and the future I was stepping into. That evening I didn't go home. I walked for hours instead. Because I knew Victor was right about one thing. They would come back. And when they did, I wouldn't be the same person they threw out. Not even close. As I reached my room, my phone rang again. My mother. I stared at the screen. And this time, answered. Emily, she said quickly. We need you back. Everything is falling apart. Closed my eyes. And whispered, I know. Then I hung up. 'Cause for the first time, I wasn't running toward them. I was deciding whether they deserved me back at all. The moment I hung up on my mother, my hand didn't shake. And that surprised me the most. Because once upon a time, that voice alone could break me. But now, didn't. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, staring at the screen like it belonged to someone else. Seconds passed. Then minutes. And then it started. Messages. Voicemails. My family was finally reacting like I still mattered. But not because they cared. 'Cause they were scared. I opened one message from Daniel. Whatever game you're playing, stop it. The restaurant is collapsing. We need to fix this now. Another from my mother. Emily, please come home. Your father is not well. We need you. And then one more. This time from my father. Short. Cold. Unusual. Come back. We will discuss your proposal. I laughed quietly. Real laugh. Not because it was funny. But because it was predictable. They didn't say sorry. They didn't say we were wrong. They said come back and fix it. Like I was still their safety net. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. The next morning I didn't go to them. I went to Victor. Same place. Same floor. Same glass walls looking over a city that never stopped moving. He was already waiting. You saw the messages, he said before I even spoke. Yes, I replied. And I sat down slowly. They want me back. Victor nodded like he expected that. They always do when systems collapse. I looked at him carefully. This isn't just about business anymore, I said. It's personal for them now. And for you. He asked. Pause. That question mattered more than it should have. For a moment I thought about everything. The years of work. The silence. The humiliation. The night I was thrown out like I was nothing. Then I answered honestly. Victor leaned back slightly. That one word felt heavier than expected. Then he pushed a document toward me. Before you decide anything, he said, you need to understand your position. Opened it. Inside was a full breakdown of my family's restaurant. Supplier withdrawals. Negative reviews increasing daily. Staff resignations. Cash flow issues. And at the bottom, a line that made my stomach tighten. Projected closure risk. 72% within 30 days. I looked up slowly. This is accelerating, I said. Yes, Victor replied. Because without you they don't just lose structure. They lose control. Silence filled the space. Then he added something sharper. And now they know it. That afternoon I finally went back. Not home. The restaurant. I stood outside for a full minute before entering. Same smell. Same sounds. But everything felt unstable. Like the building itself was holding its breath. Inside it was chaos. Orders delayed. Staff arguing. Customers visibly frustrated. My father was standing near the counter, speaking sharply to someone on the phone. My mother looked exhausted. And Daniel. He looked angry. But the moment I walked in, everything stopped. Silence. My father slowly turned. And for the first time, I didn't see control in his eyes. I saw desperation. Emily, my mother said immediately, stepping forward. Thank God you came. I raised my hand slightly, stopping her. Not cruel, just final. I didn't come back, I said calmly. Came to listen. Daniel scoffed. Listen. You think this is the time for attitude? I turned my eyes to him. And he stopped talking instantly. 'Cause something had changed. I wasn't reacting like before. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't defensive. I was aware. My father stepped forward slowly. What do you want? He asked. That question. Finally. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, I want control over operations. Silence hit the room like a weight. My mother's face changed immediately. Emily. That's non-negotiable, I interrupted softly. Daniel laughed once. You think we're going to give you the restaurant after what you did? I turned to him. You mean after you threw me out? That shut him up. My father exhaled deeply. And then something unexpected happened. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He just said, if we agree, you fix this. I nodded once. Another pause. Then he asked the real question. And if we refuse? I looked at him steadily. Then you lose it. Not a threat. Fact. Because everyone in that room already knew it. They just didn't want to say it out loud. And for the first time, my family wasn't in control of the conversation anymore. It was. The silence inside the restaurant felt different now. Before, silence meant comfort for them. Now it meant pressure. My father stood still, watching me like he was trying to figure out when exactly I stopped being the daughter he could control. My mother looked nervous. Daniel looked angry, but uncertain underneath it. And me felt calm. Too calm. Because I already knew what was going to happen next. My father finally spoke. If we give you operations control, how do we know you won't destroy everything out of revenge? That question told me everything. They still didn't understand. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Revenge is emotional. What I was building was structural. I looked at him. I'm not here to destroy anything, I said quietly. I'm here to decide what deserves to stay alive. That hit the room harder than any argument could. Daniel scoffed, but it sounded weaker now. You really think investors will trust you? I turned to him slowly. And he stopped again. Because this time I didn't need to raise my voice. I just said, without me you're already collapsing. No emotion. No anger. Just truth. My mother stepped forward again, softer this time. Emily, we are your family. I looked at her for a long moment. And something inside me tightened but didn't break. I was your family when I worked 14-hour shifts, I said. I was your family when I built systems no one thanked me for. And I was your family when you erased me. Her eyes dropped. No answer came. Because there wasn't one. My father finally exhaled. He looked older than before. Tired. Defeated in a way he would never admit out loud. What exactly are your terms? He asked. That was it. The moment everything shifted permanently. I took a slow breath. And spoke clearly. 1. Full control of operations. Staff, suppliers, systems, menu and pricing. 2. No interference in daily decisions. 3. Daniel is removed from operational authority. That last line made Daniel instantly step forward. What? You can't. My father raised a hand, stopping him. Continued. For if I rebuild this restaurant, I retain the right to expand it my way. Silence again. Then my father asked the final question. And in return, I looked at all of them, one by one, and said I save it. That was it. No dramatic speech. No emotional plea. Just truth. 2 days later the agreement was signed. Not because they trusted me, but because they had no other option left. And Victor, he watched everything from a distance. Not interfering. Just observing. Like he was watching something he already predicted unfold exactly as planned. The first week back inside operations was chaos. But controlled chaos. I changed suppliers. Fixed pricing. Rebuilt kitchen workflow. Reorganized staff schedules. And within days, the decline slowed. Then stopped. Then reversed. By the second week, customer reviews started improving. By the third week, waiting times dropped. By the fourth week, the restaurant was no longer collapsing. It was stabilizing. And my family, they noticed something they didn't expect. They didn't need to save it anymore. 'Cause I already had. One evening I stood alone inside the restaurant after closing. Tea tables. Quiet lights. The same place that once rejected me. Now running under my rules. My phone buzzed. Victor. One message. You didn't just rebuild it. You proved something bigger. I didn't reply immediately. I just looked around. 'Cause for the first time, I wasn't the ignored daughter. I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the replacement. I was the system. The foundation. The reason it stood. Behind me I heard footsteps. My father. He stopped a few steps away. I was wrong, he said quietly. The words felt heavy. We're not perfect, but real. I didn't turn immediately. Because forgiveness isn't instant. And power doesn't rush. Finally I said, don't be wrong again. Then I added, because next time, I won't come back. I turned off the lights. And walked out. Not as someone who was kicked out. But as someone who could never be removed again.